Well, good evening.
That would help if I unmuted him. Good evening.
Probably.
It's one of those lazy Sunday afternoons when I could be under the covers.
You and me both.
I can imagine. Well, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good.
I enjoyed your message today.
Thank you.
And what was it? Did you give us a topic? Was it
I did
possessions? What are you
possessions.
what are you possessing?
It was possessions. We were talking about the different types
Possessions.
of possessions and what um what's possessing you, or what do not letting the things you possess you.
Right. And
So.
as you were speaking, I was thinking about that. There's
Mhm.
some things that I know that I let possess me,
Mhm.
such as overeating. I've gotten hooked on Laffy Taffies. That candy we grew up on, and it's like the banana ones are the ones that I love the most. And last night I ate quite a bit, and it just did not agree with me. When I laid down, I was asking God, please forgive me. I'm so sorry. Or just, and I said, I have to stop.
Yeah.
There has to be a limit. And so I was asking God, don't let me even buy anymore when I go back to the Dollar Tree. Just don't let me buy the Laffy Taffies. But yeah,
Well,
that was good though, what you spoke on.
thank you. Well, I know sometimes I
Good
mean, you
evening,
do.
Kiara. Kiara says good evening.
Good evening, Sierra.
One day we would
Sierra.
love to meet you,
Uh-huh.
and maybe when we come to the big state of Texas, I know we're talking about coming in September for Sarah Jakes. What is that, Woman Evolve?
Yes.
Who knows, Kiara? Maybe we can meet you then. What do you say about that? You've been following our church for at least almost 2 years.
Has it been that long?
I think it's been 2 years. I think she started with us when we were over at Elder Dean's. And
That's
then we
good.
can finally meet you, finally get to see your face. How about that?
Yes, we. Mm-hmm.
Said, let's do it.
That'd be great. I was thinking about you were talking about the Laffy Taffies. Um, I had to stop myself from eating the hot tamales. I used to love hot tamales, and I literally knew that they were actually causing me to have hot flashes. And I don't like hot flashes, and they would really bring them on. And I literally stopped with the help of God. Thank God. And your sister-in-law Ruth used to bring me um, hot tamales, and I'd have them in my office in a jar, in a candy jar that she'd bring me,
Mhm.
and I'd put them in there. But I knew after a while that I had to stop um, eating those for for my own. About to say sanity, but for my own health and for just not going into those hot flashes. Same thing years ago. I'm drinking coffee again now, but I stopped drinking coffee for about 8 years, 8 or 9 years, and it really did upset my stomach, and I knew it was the coffee. Doesn't seem to do it now, but then it did. And but anyway, yeah, we have to take control of the things that want to take control of us. And
Mhm.
if we let it,
Because our bodies are getting
basic.
older. We're getting older.
Yeah, it's true.
And these bodies are not taking everything that it used to take. I
That's true.
know even for me, I'm 58. Yeah, 58. So I kind of got over the hot flashes years
Hmm.
ago. But
Hmm.
now, since I'm on this new journey, there's a medication that I have to take, and it causes hot flashes.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes the sweat is just. pouring, pouring,
Yeah.
and it's really miserable. So I did a little video the other day because I wanted to start a podcast concerning, us as women. Our bodies are changing,
Hmm.
different things are going on that we're not used to. And the response that I got from women all over the world,
Wow.
it's how they agree with me and what can we do about it. And they just all of us are agreeing to how the bodies are changing
Hmm.
as we're getting older and we're having to deal and things is not working like they used to.
That's true.
So, but
That's so true. That's true. Well, if we want to just go ahead and delve into kind of like where we left off at last week, I want to apologize to Valerie first of all, if she's on. I want to apologize to her because we're supposed to drop her off a book, and I kid you not, I hadn't thought about that uh, because I didn't go out of my house. Last week was extremely hot, and I don't think I went out. We went out later. Like one night we went out. We went and picked up some food, but I still didn't think about it. Otherwise, I was inside of the house um, the last week with those triple digits, and so um, hopefully maybe I can get it to her this week. But it's again, it had to do with the weather, and I just didn't. And I apologize to her because I forgot to do it, and also I didn't think to even message her and let her know. So if she's on or she
maybe
hears me,
maybe I
better
can
yet.
drop it off to her job tomorrow.
Okay, if you're in the vicinity, that'd be great. Yeah. Um, so okay. So anyway, we kind of left off. We were if you had the book, and again, we were on page 5, so I'm not going to be rushing through it. Yeah, the book is called Experiencing Grief, and so again, we'll put the disclaimer out there. We don't profess to be counselors or MFTs or all those things, psychotherapists, the whole 9 years. We're not. We just um, I'm the pastor of the Vipin City Church, um, and we've all experienced grief, or
And
we are
experience is the best
experiencing it. Pardon me?
experience is the best teacher. We
That
have
is the
definitely
saying.
experienced grief
Yeah, it
and
that's for
and
sure.
are experienced it even now.
That's true. That's an old saying, but I remember our grandmother used to say, um, she said listening was the best teacher because if you listen to some things, you wouldn't have to experience it. But in grief, in this right here, all of us, nobody's exempt from this one. You're going to experience some form of grief at some point in your lives. Whether it be, we talked about it last week, whether it be a family member, a friend, um, a job, something that's close to you. Um, you experience grief in this life. We're not here to stay. I remember they used to say we were born to die. I never understood that saying. But we're born to die. You're born, and each day you live, you're getting a day closer to the grave. Um, And we've experienced in these last few years, probably all of us have experienced death on a different level. First of all, dealing with the pandemic, none of us have ever been in a pandemic that I know of. The whole world shut down because of it, and people just were dying left and right. And it was just numbers. You would just hear it on the news. So many thousands of people died. It was just numbers, and people didn't get to grieve the way we knew, or the way that was familiar with anybody who's lost somebody. The way we used to, grieve. You were able to arrange the services, and family would come together, and friends, and all the. And you couldn't do that. Like somebody mentioned last week, some people died alone. Some people that didn't know where their family members were at. They just knew they had passed, couldn't get to them. Um, it was really something. Well, you fast forward. what that was in 2020, 2019, 2020, 4 years later, and people are still grieving. You know, it's some form, it's somebody that's still grieving, and maybe they're in another, maybe in another area of grief, because there's so many areas to it, the process to it. They may be now past the shock of it, but they might be in denial, or they might be angry, they may be bitter. You know, all of these different emotions we find is a part of the process of grief. And our writer, H. Norman Wright, wants us to know that we need to normalize these emotions. These are normal feelings. Thank you. Experiencing Grief by H. Norman Wright. Yes. So these are all normal feelings. Okay. It says when you enter into grief, you enter into the valley of shadows. Now, last week we talked about you. He talked about entering into the house of mourning. Remember, now it's the valley of shadows. Have you ever seen the shadow? And it you know, you think you see something, or you see something that's kind of dark, and it startles you. Well, shadows, and I looked this up and got a definition of it. It says the dark area or shape produced by a body coming between rays of light and surface. So it's ominous, it's oppressive. So if you've ever seen shadows, it's just like, now can you just imagine just in a place of shadows, dark places? Every now and then you might get a glimmer of light, and it's not for long, you know, it's not for long. Sometimes they say sometimes up, sometimes down. Uh, but during this process of grief and grieving, sometimes you don't see light, even when it is light. It's just dark, because first of all, it's a new way of experiencing life. You've lost somebody, or you've lost something or someone that you've been used to having in your life, that you were always around, so to speak, or you could always pick up the phone and you could talk to that person. And now you're at a place where you don't hear that person's voice anymore. You don't see their face anymore. You it's just everything about them is not there, and you have to create a new normal. And so he's saying when you enter into grief, you enter into a valley of shadows. Yolanda, you have anything you want to say?
No.
So there's nothing heroic or noble about grief. Nothing heroic or noble about it. It says it is painful. It's painful. It hurts to lose someone. And sometimes, you know how that old saying is, you never miss your water until your well runs dry. And sometimes you really don't know how much you cared, maybe just care so much for a person, or until you don't have them anymore. And you realize big, um, how big of a part they played in your life, you know. I remember my dad passing, our father passing, and I'm the one out of the girls that took on his love for fishing, and my brothers as well. But out of all the girls, it was me. I think Lumpy liked to fish too. Sometimes she would go if we wanted, if she was available, where she would go, but not like me. I could go fishing every day. If they wanted to go, I could go fishing every day. Um, we would go to Lake Isabella sometimes. I don't drive Lake Isabella. I've never driven it on my own. Even when I worked for the ambulance company, God just blessed me. Anytime I would get what they would call it, a call. Anytime I get an assignment to go and pick up somebody that lived in Lake Isabella, I would make my way to a phone and let them know, please change my assignment. I'm afraid to drive Lake Isabella. I don't want to drive it. And I never had to drive it. In all the years that I worked for the ambulance company, I was able to get out of that. But they ended up telling me years later they wouldn't let anybody else do that. You had to do the call. But it wasn't a easy drive for me. But I was saying with my dad, he was the one that I would go to Lake Isabella with. So I haven't been to Lake Isabella since he passed. I think my brother Douglas, I rode with him before, and but my father was alive. Douglas and my dad were the only two that I would get in the car with with to even drive to Lake Isabella. So all of that, just knowing, I miss that. I miss going to Lake Isabella, but I I can hardly imagine going. Well, I can't to drive it myself, but my husband lets me know there's another way you can get around it that is not as windy, but you'd have to go way out like Lake Isabella, and not Lake Isabella, but like Lancaster area, come back through. But in saying that, you create a new normal. Well, my new normal is if I go fishing, I'm going somewhere else. I don't go to Lake Isabella. So, anyway, um, it talks about that it's painful and it's work and it's work. You have to work through it. And some days you don't feel like working through it. Some days you don't even feel like getting up. Getting up. You don't even feel like getting up. You don't feel like talking. You don't feel like nobody calling. You don't feel like going to work. Sometimes you just want to be in a dark place. Just but it's a part of grief. And everybody deals with it differently, you know. It
And
says
it is
it's
such a disruption. It's an interruption
mm-hmm.
in your
Yeah,
life, you know. It just
it is.
interrupts everything.
Mhm. Yeah. It is an interruption. You were just doing life the way you normally do it, and boom, something knocks you off course. I mean, a death knocks you off course, and it's not easy, not easy at all. Said it's a lingering process, but it is necessary for all kinds of losses. Says it has been labeled everything from intense mental anguish to acute sorrow. Oh, well, I'm sorry. It has been labeled everything from intense mental anguish to acute sorrow to deep remorse. This is what grief has been labeled as. Intense mental anguish can mess with your mind because of all the different things you think about, all these different emotions that you're experiencing: shock, denial, anger, bitterness. Another one says apathy, anger, love, guilt, sadness, fear, self pity, and helplessness. I can't make it. And we talked about, I think last week, how some people are so distraught over hearing the loss of a family member, and you heard of people dying too at the services, a family member dying at the service.
Just overwhelmed.
Yeah, just overwhelmed. It's painful. It is so painful, so painful. And if you're going through it, you're going through it. Try to talk it out. Try to, if you're able to have a therapist, get one. If your insurance allows it, get one. If you got a good friend that you can talk to, or they can listen to you, uh, do that.
And
Do
yeah, I love the fact of having a good friend, and it's nothing like a
that.
good
Hmm.
friend. But the other day, I was thinking, I am so glad that some of this stuff that I'm sharing, that I don't have to ever worry about hearing it again.
Hmm.
I don't have to worry about, I sometimes get upset with you years ago and they throw stuff back up in your face that
Hmm.
that you shared with them. But yeah, like you said, if you can afford, or if your insurance will allow you to speak with the therapist, then I'm for that. And like I
Yeah.
said, there were some things that I shared with this therapist the other day, and I thought, I am so glad to be getting this off my chest, and I don't have to ever worry about you looking at me side eye, or I'm
Hmm.
kind of wondering, in the back of my mind, should I have shared this? Did I share too much?
Hmm. Yeah. And then we talked about you in the last few months we lost um the last mother of the church that we grew up in, Mother Cockrum. And so if you have a good mother in your church, I don't know, all the mothers that we grew up with have gone on. They say to be with the Lord. All of them I know of, you know. And it was good to have them in your life too, where you could go, you could talk to them, and you wouldn't have to worry about a Sister Shear say it hitting you back in the face. And she would tell you some things and tell you that don't you let me hit, don't let me, or don't you let this hit me in my face. Meaning don't let me hear it again. And I remember my mother talking about things. There was things that she had to go to the grave with, and she did. I know she went to the grave with things that maybe people shared with her, and that's good. There's some things you got to go to the grave with, and it's some things I'm so glad that, um, as an altar worker, and I was an altar worker for years. There's things that make some of them shared with me. I don't even remember what they said, and I'm glad about that. But I know I had some things that were shared to me with me, but I'm glad I don't even remember it. Not that I would have repeated it, but I'm glad I don't remember it to even repeat it. So that's going with me. But you need to be able to express yourself to somebody. Some things you don't want shared with everybody. But during this grieving process, because so many of us are going through the same thing, and you're just really not alone. Just not alone. I think this is good that we even talk about it. Just trying to talk about it tonight. Just even how you feel, you know. So in case somebody else feel like, oh, I thought I thought I was by myself, or I was wondering where that anger came from, or that denial, or that bitterness, or you know, or feeling like I'm helpless, or I don't want to live. That's it's normal, and expected.
Can I say this?
Yes.
I'm in a group with a group of women, prayer group, and the leader, Christian Joy Wagner, she was praying with us this afternoon, and I just loved how she brought out. She was There's a young lady that we're praying for, and her name is Lisa. So remember Lisa and her family in your prayers. Um, but anyway, she just began to talk, as she was praying, and she began to say, like, God, things that we don't understand, things that we get upset, even, like, and she just brought up Mary and Martha, how they kind of like scolded God, like, if you would
Hmm.
have been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And when he was out on the boat with the disciples, and they were telling him, like, do you care that we
Hmm.
and those are feelings that we have when we're going through grief. God, did you know why at this time?
Hmm.
Do you care that my heart is involved in it? And I mean, when she was saying that, I was just thinking, I'm so glad that God understands us, you know, that He understands when we have those questions like, God, why? Why now?
Yeah.
Do you care that our brother perished? But anyway, I was just thinking, boy, I'm just kind of hit home with me, questions that
Yeah.
I've even asked God,
Hmm.
why could you have spared their lives? Could you have given her another year?
Hmm.
And some things we get an answer to, and some things we
Hmm.
don't.
Some things we don't. That's so true. That's so true.
And the book says, there's phases of grief.
Yeah.
Ivory, He does understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
God understands me. Yes, He does, Ivory. He understands you. He understands our pain, our grief, our disappointment. He understands it all.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of touched on that when we that at the beginning, talking about the faces of grief, being that it could be a grandparent, a parent, a friend, or
Oh yeah.
um, a husband, a wife, a son, a child. The faces of grief when you don't when they don't have when you don't have them anymore. That's a face that's missing. But you have, thank God, you have memories of them, but it's just so different when that person is no longer around, where you could call, you can confide in, you could talk with, or you could laugh, and person is just not here anymore. um he goes on to say that some have said that grief is like a feeling of heaviness. He says heaviness. He says I've had this overwhelming oppressive weight which I can't shed. Just heavy. Have you ever just gotten up and you just feel heavy?
Mhm.
Almost like you can't even move. Just heavy. Just weighted down. Just heavy. So it's been described as being a heavy, oppressive weight. Hmm. He said it's a multitude of emotion. A multitude of emotion is involved in the grief process. Emotions that seem out of control and often appear in conflict with one another. And so it goes into talking about the different kinds of emotion. And I shared them already, but I'll go with it again. It says, then with each loss comes bitterness, emptiness, apathy, love, anger, guilt, sadness, fear, self pity, and helplessness. These feelings have been described in this way. He said these feelings usher in emotion in the emotional freeze that covers solid ground with ice, making movement in any direction seem precarious and dangerous. Growth is hidden, progress seems blocked. It just seems like you can't go on. So it's given a description. He's given a great description of how he says the feelings sometimes usher in an emotional freeze, just like frozen. How the shock of you just frozen, you can't move. And he goes on to say it's like it covers solid ground with ice, making movement in any direction seem precarious and dangerous. Growth is hidden. Don't seem like it's hidden. Don't seem like you're functioning well. You're not progressing. You're stuck. And remember, I talked about how um, I believe the Lord gave it to me during the time of my mother. I believe that um, Moses, he gave the children of Israel 30 days to mourn Moses, and they had to move forward. They had to keep going. They couldn't stay stuck in it. So I just know that it's not a place to be stuck in. He didn't give us that. It's not a place to get stuck in, but it's a process. And sometimes people do seem to get stuck in. And that's when it'd be good if they had a therapist, you know,
Mhm.
to help them go through the process. Talk it through. You know, talk it through. And we talked about how we got into a class during my dad's death, and it was what was called grief share. And that's exactly what we
Well,
were doing.
it was actually our mothers. It was our mothers, but the man that we met, he reminded us so much of our dad.
Uh
But it was,
huh.
it was our mother.
Oh, was it our mother? I thought it was our
Yeah,
father.
it was our mother.
Okay, but it was grief share,
Hmm.
and it was sharing your grief. And I remember the young lady that just came in. She's like, oh, she just couldn't wait to get off work so she could just come in and just cry. And
Yeah.
that's just what she did. She sat there and cried, you know, because you have to keep going. And I kind of do thank God for how um when you have a job, you know, I don't know how it goes now, but I'm sure they still give you time off sometime for deaths. Um, but it was only like 3 or 4 days, and that would have been an immediate family member. But I kind of thank God for that because it kind of puts you back into the move of things. You got to go back to work. You got to get busy, stay busy. And it kind of keeps you functioning, keeps you going. You know, I remember one time I took my vacation. I had used to have so much vacation, just time just building up. And this was during the time of my dad's death. And I remember taking vacation with the mindset because I didn't feel like I really got to grieve my father. And I remember taking the vacation, and I was headed down Chester on my way home. And I remember saying, when I get home, I'm gonna be able to cry the way I want to cry. And the tears came, just welled up in my eyes because I was going home to mourn, so I thought. And they welled up in my eyes, but I said, the Lord dried them up. The tears never did fall. And I never did get home and mourn my father like I thought I was just going to be home crying. And I thank God that he didn't let me get into that state where I just thought I got to be home for 2-3 weeks just crying, whatever I was felt I needed to do. But God carried me through that. And what kind of vacation would that have been? You know, I couldn't do nothing. I'm stuck. I'm just weeping. But God is really good, and He is a present help. He really is a present help in the time of trouble, in the time of grief. He is a present help.
Can you imagine them that have no hope? The scripture tells us that we don't mourn as
Hmm.
those who have no hope. And I was just thinking, as bad as grief is for us, who have hope. Can you imagine those that don't know God? Or, you know, can you imagine what they feel like?
Yeah, yeah. He also talks about he describes grief. I don't know if you heard about the what was it called during the 30s? I think it was the Dust Bowl. Remember, it was some type the Oklahoma. I think it was in Oklahoma. They had such severe storm of dust. It was
Didn't they
just dust.
travel here?
Pardon me.
Didn't they travel here?
A lot of them
Uh,
went right to Lamont. A
yeah.
lot of them Lamont. But yeah, the Dust Bowl, and they talked about the how you couldn't see you and how they inhaled all the dust and they got black lung and all. It was just bad. I mean, they got book written about, probably
Mhm.
several books written about that experience, the Dust Bowl. But he says that perhaps the description of land in the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma in the 1930s is descriptive of your life at this time during grief. He said maybe it's descriptive of like the Dust Bowl. And he says a day went by and the wind increased, steady, unbroken by gust. The dust from the roads fluffed up and spread out and fell on the weeds beside the fields. Little by little, the sky was darkened by the mixing dust, and the wind felt over the earth, loosened the dust, and carried it away. The wind grew stronger. The corn threshed in the wind and made a dry, rushing sound. The finest dust did not settle back to earth now, but disappeared into the darkening sky. So the dust was just so you think of grief. Just it just feels like a storm in your life. You know, the dust is just flying. Your
It's
emotions are
unsettling.
all over the place. Yeah, and it's just not settling. It's just all over. When you get up, it's just a whirlwind. He said, the dawn came, but no day. The dawn came. Can you imagine that? The dust storm is just dark all day, all night. It was
Yeah.
daytime, but it didn't look like day. And he says, in the gray sky, a red sun appeared. A dim red circle gave a little light like dusk. And as the day advanced, the dusk slipped back toward darkness, and the wind cried and whimpered over the fallen corn. Men and women huddled in their houses and they tied handkerchiefs over their noses when they went out and wore goggles to protect their eyes. When the night came again, it was a black night, for the stars could not pierce the dust to get down, and the window lights could not even spread beyond their own yards. It was so dark that the lights that was inside the house just didn't go any further, didn't even illuminate outside because it was so dark. Now, he's describing what's happening with the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, but also saying that this sometimes you may feel like this during the process of grief, that is synonymous with the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. He said, now the dust was evenly mixed with the air, an emulsion of dust and air. Houses were shut tight and cloth wedged around the doors and windows, but the dust came so thinly that it could not be seen in the air, and it settled like pollen on the chairs and the tables and on the dishes. An upheaval not only alters the landscape, but often deforests the landscape, leading to further devastation. The same thing can happen when tragedy strikes. The small 40-acre farm that is your life. He said the same thing can happen when tragedy strikes. It's just like pain, whatever, it just settles everywhere. He's talking about the dust, how even though they had the windows, uh, packed with cloth and different things like that, but the dust still came in and settled on the furniture and settled on the dishes and settled inside the house. Yolanda, I don't know if you remember. I remember being at South High, so you would have been probably there too, or right at Golden State. We had a dust storm. It was 2 or 3 days of dust storm years
Yeah.
ago. Couldn't go nowhere. The trees had fallen. I remember the big tree had fell across Lotus Lane, down the street, further down Lotus Lane. It went from one side of the street to the other. But it was so dark, and I remember that we couldn't get to the grocery stores or nothing like that. And it was a man a day before the dust storms happened. It was a man came through the neighborhood. He had a truckload of cabbage, and he was just giving out cabbage to people. And I remember that dad had got some of the cabbage. And I kid you not, probably if he hadn't gotten some of the cabbage, we couldn't get to the stores. Your food was spilled, waste and everything, but we had cabbage. And you couldn't go anywhere because of the dust. And this doesn't equate almost to the Dust Bowl of the 30s, but still, it was so bad. I remember we were cleaning up dust like a couple of years later because the dust gets in and it settles, just settled. That thin dust settled, got behind your furniture and everything, and it was bad.
Yeah.
A dust storm that all you seen was dust in the air. So he talks about grief being like that. Just your whole life again, Yolanda's disrupted, interrupted.
Mhm.
And it just seems like everything is just out of control. Your mind is here, your thoughts are there. Um, you're just all over the place. It says Steinbeck's description of the Dust Bowl is what the weather of the heart is sometimes like for someone who has endured a great loss. I read that again. He said, the description of the Dust Bowl is what the weather of the heart is sometimes for someone who has endured a great loss. So your heart feels like that, just heavy, cloudy, dusty, hurtful, not just what I've talked about this dust storm. So the steady wind blows over you, opposes you, oppresses you. The wind grows stronger, whisking away what little soil surrounds the few rootlets of spiritual life you have left. It affects your spiritual life.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't you it's okay if you don't feel like reading the scripture.
Yeah.
Because you don't. It's okay if you don't feel like putting on praise and worship songs. You don't feel like a praise and a worship. The Lord understands. He said he knows how frail we are. He knows how frail we are. And sometimes you don't. You don't. So it goes on to say that it says other people talk about, well, let's see. Um, when the wind comes, stinging reminders of how different your life is from everyone else's. Other people talk together, shop together, dine together, laugh together. And the taken for granted normalness of their lives sting your face so raw, you can't bear it. Somebody feels like that.
Mhm.
They're still enjoying life. They're over there, they're going out to eat, they're laughing, they have their sister, they have their mother, they have their father, their brother, whoever, they got them. And it bother you. because you've lost yours.
Yeah.
People sometimes feel like that. They're not always happy because you're happy. You know what? I've lost some people in my life. I remember a close friend of mine, Sister Paulette Anderson. She had a sister, one sister. I believe she just had the one sister, and the sister and the husband and their one son, only son, went somewhere. They was going somewhere, and some lady hit them from the back and killed all three of them.
Oh no.
You remember that?
I don't remember that.
I went to the funeral. It was at West Angeles Church in Los Angeles
Wow.
years, but just wiped out the whole family. The son he's an older son, and he didn't have children, so that was just the whole family of them. And so, uh, sometimes things are just
Yeah.
tragic losses, tragic losses. Um, it talks about you lying in bed at night staring at the ceiling. Sometimes you sleep flees from you. It just, you can't sleep, can't eat, you know. So your thoughts are incoherent pieces of a puzzle you have grown weary of, yet can't get rid of. I'm just a puzzle. I want to put it back together, but it takes time. I think I talked about how they said that, or it's said that grief is usually like a 7 year process. It'll be a 7 year process. Think about who have 7 years to grieve over one person, and you get hit with another one. That's another seven. We just it's just the Lord just taking us through this, even just giving us strength.
Yeah.
Just giving us strength. And I say it again. I said it last week. My dear aunt who passed away this past January. She used to say, "Laugh when you can, cry when you must, laugh when you can." And that was a good saying. Some days you can laugh, do that, and some days you cry, do that. Whatever you have to do. It says, and he goes on to say, your headache won't go away. Now you have a headache that won't go away. It says, or the guilt or the regret. It says, you're out of tears, you're out of prayers. You've waited in silence, you've wept in silence, wandered in silence. You wonder if anyone is even up there. Sometimes
Yep.
you wonder, do God even hear you? It was a David that said, soul, why be cast down? He's talking about why be disquieted within me. But he also said, will you cast off forever? Will you not pretty much pay attention to me forever? Will you be angry at me forever? Sometimes you do. You wonder, do the Lord even hear you? Are you upset at me, God? Are you seem like you've turned your back on me? You know. But he hasn't. He said, I'll be with you, lo, until the ends of the earth. Lo, I'm with you until the ends of the earth. With you always, even until the ends of the earth. But sometimes you don't feel like he's there. You don't feel like he's there. You wonder if anyone's up there beyond the ceiling. Anybody have any questions, or just not just comments?
Latrice says, yes, you can really feel that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He said something about religious friends. Let me see what he said. He said, so you wonder if anyone is even up there beyond the ceiling. If anyone was ever up there, was anybody ever up there, or if it has all been just so much pious talk and positive thinking, reinforced by the peer pressure of your religious friends, or your
I
mind will.
think
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I think one of the reasons why his books are so successful is because he's so real.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just tell that this pain that he talks about, he
Mm-hmm.
knows, he knows the
Mm-hmm.
pain. He knows what we feel, those of us who have gone through a loss.
Right, right. These are
So it's
talking
not
about
just like
talking
he's a
about.
doctor that's just talking. And everybody have experienced grief. I'm just saying, so real. His words are so real.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he's talking about how you have a headache. You start thinking all kinds of things. Sometimes you just a ball of mixed emotions, and you wonder, is there really a God? Sometimes does He really hear me? That's what he's saying. Does He really hear me, or is this just pressure from my religious friends? Somebody has just been telling me this. The mind go through a whole bunch of things. Your mind,
Yeah.
because you've lost something so dear and so precious and you were so connected to. Um, talks about we just talked about how dark it can be. You know, you go to bed at night and you hate the night almost. Whoa, God, when will the day come? And day comes, and you still feel like you're in the dark. You know, he said, outside the sky is darkened, the night is black. Light from heaven, once as sparkling as a star-studded sky, cannot pierce the airborne dust. What little light you have within you doesn't spread very far either. You just, it ain't no joke. It really ain't no joke. And sometimes, like we talked about, some of the wrong things to say to somebody is, you have to just get over it. Well, with the Lord's help, you'll get through it. I don't know that you ever get over it, because it's sometimes you have a wave of emotions come over you. And our parents been gone a long time, and somebody else's parents been gone longer than ours, and they have waves of emotions, bouts of tears, thinking about their parents, you know, or whoever they lost. I remember, well, I had before I was pregnant with Austin, I had a miscarriage, and I was really bothered by the miscarriage, and I know God gave me the grace to go through the miscarriage. But I remember years later, I don't think I even thought about, once I got through it, I don't think I thought about one day. It just all swept back over me. And I just really was emotional. And I don't think I ever had experienced that like that before. But I was emotional about the baby I lost, you know. And I think Austin might have been, she was probably here then. I'm sure she was. She was probably teenager going on into adulthood. But it just swept over me out of nowhere, you know. So the Lord helps us through it, but sometimes you you digress. Sometimes you go back, and it's a wave of emotions. And then he goes on to just explain. He's still kind of describing, kind of like the emotions or your feelings as related to like the Dust Bowl. But he talks about through the night the wind continues. The night is long, and it seems the dawn will never come. Finally, the dawn comes, but no day. A gray sky veils the sun, and God, who once seemed so radiant, now seems like a dim circle that gives little light. Sometimes you just don't feel the presence of God. It's like some people don't know anything about God. And even those of us that do know, sometimes you just don't feel his presence. I mean, and it doesn't mean that you don't, I mean, he's there, but it's a process. It's just emotional. You're going to have these emotions. We're not exempt. We're not exempt. It says eventually the wind subsides, the dust settles, and it is safe to go outside again. What then? How do we reclaim the dust bowl that our life has become? Where do we even start? So I think that with those questions, it's kind of like, how do we begin to begin something new after you've lost someone that has been in your life for a long time? How do we even begin? It says, has this experience or has this description been your experience? I don't know what somebody else may have felt or how you would describe your nights and days of grieving. I mean, how would you describe it? Maybe somebody that's on. Might type it in the chat. I mean, what are some of the emotions you feel? Do you feel bitterness? Do you feel like your world is gray, or it's just kind of like you're just in a whirlwind, or just what emotions have you felt? And if you feel like you're coming through it, you kind of like I realize that I've lost my mom. I've lost my sister. What are we doing? What are you doing? Now, you all heard me talk about me being a caregiver for my
Kiara
sister.
says anger.
Who said that?
Kiara.
Anger. Yeah. Yeah. Angry. Can be angry. Why me? Why her? Why him? You know.
And
Yeah.
Azetta said description been your experience. I don't know if somebody else may have felt hurt.
What is it?
I don't know if I don't even know what this means. She says, I realize that I'm lost to life.
Description been.
Everything takes. I don't know, Anna said you might need to be a little bit more specific. I don't know what you're saying.
And then sometime when if you I don't know if you could do this online talking to text, it'll say all kind of stuff. You
Yeah,
don't even know what it's saying.
right.
So um yeah,
Janine says, when I lost my mom, I felt like I was suffocating and couldn't breathe.
that's
I
good.
would have to open the windows to go or either go outside.
Yeah, that's a great description. And that's a real emotion. That's a real feeling. Like she said that, when she lost him, I felt like I was suffocating and couldn't breathe. So that's kind of like the way they're talking even about the Dust Bowl. They were pretty much suffocating with all that dust. They had to put handkerchiefs around their mouth. Whatever you have to do to get through the process. Open the window, go sit outside, whatever you have to do. I think what happened, yeah, I thought that's what it was too. I think what happened when I was speaking on the speaker, Darlene was repeating what she was saying. Okay, okay. But anyway, it was just giving a description of the Dust Bowl. How grief is just can be synonymous with that. And I think uh, this writer, gave a great analogy of that. Kind of like could be just kind of like the way we feel sometimes going through grief. Like Janine said, she felt like she was suffocating, you know, just suffocating, couldn't breathe. It says, has this description been your experience? For many in grief, it has. For many in grief, it has. Think about the husband and wife, maybe, or the wife or the husband that lost their spouse and they have been together 40, 50 years. That's a long time to be with one person or to be with that person. You begin to, your space is their space. You know everything about them, they know everything about you. And then one day comes and that person is no longer there. And then you try to take up the slack or whatever. You can't, it's just like you can't do it. I can't imagine it. It's a judge that comes on, and sometimes I watch her, see her come across my feed, and I can watch her, and sometimes I can't think of her unless she's a black judge. But she kind of documents her journey in being a widow. She lost her husband, and you could just feel it when she talked about it. She was a judge. She was on
I know who
TV
you're
for a long
talking about. I
time.
can't think of her name.
Uh-huh.
Her hair is always nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but now she just kind of like, if she get up and it's just over her head, that's the
yeah,
way it is. And
yeah.
she
I
just
know who
talking
you're talking
about it.
about.
Yeah, and I think it was unexpected, and she just talked about
It
how much she
was.
loved her husband.
Yeah, yeah. He died unexpectedly.
Yeah, unexpectedly. So she talks about it, and evidently this is what's helping her get through it by getting on, sharing with people how she's feeling. On social media, the platforms are good places. Like it's good and bad with all of it, but that's what she seems to seems to do is get on and just talk about how she feels today, you know. Um, anyway, um, so it goes on to say that for many, grief has been just like the Dust Bowl. Perhaps it says you are wanting to reclaim the Dust Bowl of your life. You're wanting to reclaim the Dust Bowl of your life. At some point, you know, you do. Life continues. You have to keep going. You know, you really, really do. You have to keep going. Even when you don't feel like it. Like I said, it's a blessing, kind of like that they only give you 2-3 days off at work so you can get back into the swing of things, so to speak. You know, you can keep it, push it, keep it moving, and then you don't have all the time to just be sitting up thinking so much. You know, it says the first step to accomplish this is by understanding your grief now, in the future, and the fact that what you are experiencing is normal.
Is normal.
I read it again. It says the first step to accomplish this is understanding your grief now. Understand it now, where you're at right now, the future, in the future, and the fact that what you are experiencing is normal. Is normal. That's the end of chapter 1. So the next.
Annabella wrote something.
Okay, I'm sorry, Annette. So I was saying everything takes time. We go through all emotions from happiness, that's correct, happiness, sadness, angriness. Um, she says, what I found out is this, if is we just know dealing with life as I get older. You're gonna have to deal with life. And we are dealing with a lot of things as we get older. You know, when we were in our 20s, we weren't thinking so much about death and who's dying and who died. We didn't think about it. And I don't think that we've seen or heard of so much death as we have in these last 4 or 5 years with the pandemic. You know, we used to see it, hear about it, you know, over in third world countries and wars and all those different things like that. And I used to feel so bad and saddened by the kids. They used to be so sad. The eyes and stuff just looked so sad, just death. They would just see death. And now we see it so much until it's almost like people are, what's the word, desensitized to it. Almost like you desensitized to it. But it's still a very painful part of life. Very painful part of life. Okay, so what we take away from this chapter is that there are many faces of grief. Um, that your life can feel like the Dust Bowl. You can feel like you is nothing but darkness and whirlwind. Your life is full of dust. You feel like you're suffocating, as Janine says, suffocating, can't breathe. Open up the windows, and sometimes you still can't breathe. But all of this, and when you get through all of this, you deal with this. How do we get to the next step? What do? You have to know that this is grief. Understand grief. Understand it now, in the future, and the fact that what you are experiencing is normal. Okay, so next Sunday, I believe, is next Sunday
No, it's
night.
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday. Um, I have to see. I know I have a dentist appointment, so according to what they do to my mouth that day. But still, we'll be looking for Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Chapter 2 is dealing with pain and denial. Pain and denial. All right. So, anything else? Thank you all for.
It's good that we do have hope, and our hope is in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
If it were not for Him, I don't know, we wouldn't make it. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
Make it. We wouldn't survive these things that we go through. But
Yeah.
thanks be unto God who always causes us to triumph.
Yeah.
So there is
Okay.
hope. There
There is hope.
is
And
hope.
there is life after death.
There is life after death.
Life after death. So all right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Those of you who came on, Anazette and different ones. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's remember to pray for each other, pray for our neighbors, pray for our friends, pray for the world as a whole. As you know, they tried to assassinate Trump, and like I heard Pastor Hannah say, this is not a time that we would glory in this. He said, "This is letting you see what America's what America feels. What we dealing with. To
And
really
this is
be,
just the beginning of sorrows. It's going to really get bad.
yeah, get
It's going
worse.
to get
You
bad.
know, yeah. So, but anyway, just uh, just remember each other. Remember the world as a whole. All right. Okay. So I guess that's all I have, Yolanda.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
So we'll see you all back here Wednesday at 7:30.
All
Uh,
right. All
y'all have
right.
a wonderful week.
All right. Yes. God bless. Good night.